Hello and welcome to another Peterson podcast. In this week's podcast, I would like to talk a little bit about what makes up an effective PowerPoint. Now, a lot of this information was actually received from various sources, and so very little of it is mine, but I think there was a lot of really good information in this. And so I would like to go over what I would consider to be the most important things about making effective PowerPoints. And I've broken it down basically into some font tips, some color tips, graphic design tips, general tips for presentations, and then what I call going beyond the screen. So let's first talk about some fonts. First of all, with regard to fonts, understand that fonts are engineered, and they are engineered for a specific purpose. And so there are certain fonts that are definitely better than others for PowerPoints. My personal favorite is Arial. There are others you can use, but basically you want to avoid ones like Times New Roman that have a lot of extra lines at the bottom of the letters and different things like that, just because it makes it more difficult for people who are watching your presentation to actually make the letters out. Might be pretty if you're typing a letter or something like that, but you really just want to use a bare bones font like Arial to be able to see what's on the board. Make sure that your font size is not smaller than 24 point font. I prefer them to be larger than that. I prefer to use fonts that are more around 35, 45, and to use a different color for the title than you do for the information underneath the title. And so, again, I try to keep it very bare bones, white font on a black background for the title. I'll talk a little bit about that more in a second here, and then black on white for the other parts. And if you're going to use different colors and sizes and things like that, use it for a minimum. Don't use it too much, and use it to get for particular impact on the slide if you feel the need to do that. Avoid italicized. Again, it's harder to read. And try to use no more than 6 to 8 words per line. Sometimes it's going to go over, but really try not to. And when you're using bullet points, we talk about the 6x6 rule. What that means is that you have no more than 6 words per line and 6 lines per slide. And so 6 across, 6 down is a good rule to kind of go by. And again, try to use dark text on a light background or light text on a dark background. And think about the room that you're in. Is it going to be dark? Is it going to be light? And try to plan accordingly if you know the place that you're going to be. And don't use caps unless you're going to be, again, trying to accentuate a point or it's part of a title. It just looks like you're yelling at people. With regard to color, I prefer to minimize the use of color, so limit the number of colors on a screen. If you insist on using color, you should probably have no more than 2 or 3, throughout your whole presentation. It just takes away from, the person is spending too much time trying to decode your information instead of process that information. Bright colors will make small things stand out, so that could be good, but it also can detract from what you're trying to say. So, again, try not to use too much color. I think it really takes away from your actual presentations. And if you can, try to check the color when you get to where you're actually doing your presentation, because sometimes it looks different on your screen than it does on the projector. Light, can affect how that's going to work out. Different projectors will make things look differently. So if you're not sure how it's going to turn out, just go bare bones and stick to the information. With regard to graphic and design, keep the background subtle and constant. I've seen presentations that have these elaborate backgrounds, and I'm spending more time looking at the background than I am actually looking at the slide. And so try to keep it real subtle. Again, I actually prefer a white background or maybe a watermark on the background that is real subtle and not overpowering. Use enough text to just get your point across, and don't read the text to people. People hate that. They want to hear, the text on the screen is fine, but try not to overpower them with text. Keep the design clean and uncluttered. It's fine to leave some empty space around the text because then it's a little bit easier to process. If you're going to use clip art, use it sparingly and use quality clip art. If you're going with clip art, use clip art. If you're going with cartoons, go with cartoons. If you're going with photographs, go with photographs. But don't switch between them. Use the same graphic style. If you're switching between them, your user is going to spend so much time kind of trying to process that information as opposed to listening to what you're talking about. And I prefer to limit the amount of graphics on each slide. I usually try to put 2 or 3, and that might even be too many. Again, try to check your graphics on the projection screen that you're going to be actually using. And I prefer to use non-flashy graphics, not any animations that are doing things, and limit the number of transitions. Now, in this particular presentation, I do have different transitions and animations between the graphics, but because of I'm recording this, I just wanted to give it all out there. And so, the transitions used, you should try to vary a little bit, but try not to use it when only you want to make a point. Of course, check for spelling and grammar. You don't want to read to your audience. They can read for themselves, and just limit it. Try to give a brief overview at first, and then review those points again at the end. It's good for individuals to hear the major points and major information 3 times, and so just trying to make it real quick. Doesn't have to be real long and drawn out, but those are some real good tips on general presentation. It's more effective to have bullets appear one at a time, so the audience is actually listening to you instead of reading the screen. As I mentioned, this presentation is set up that way, but for ease of this podcast, I just thrown it all up there at once. I think this is probably one of the biggest, is to use a wireless mouse. I enjoy it when a presenter can move around the room and use a wireless mouse or a clicker to move through the slides. And if you're using sound, make sure that you wait until the sound has finished before you start speaking. You don't want to try to talk over your slides and things like that. If the content is complex, have printouts for your audience, or in this case, record your presentation so they can watch it at their leisure and record information down and save it as a podcast. And do not turn your back to the audience. You know what your slides say, or you should know what your slides say. So talk to them. Don't keep turning around and looking at your presentation. Keep your audience in front of you. And then going beyond the screen, that's where this comes in. This presentation has been recorded using Camtasia, which is a little bit of expensive. It's about $180 US, but there is a free version called Jing, and I greatly encourage teachers to record themselves using Jing or Cam Studio, which is also free. Or if you are able to make a small investment into Camtasia, it's a much better product and allows for the sharing of your information, and so truly going beyond the screen and allowing for learning to take place anytime somebody wants to watch it. Another important web page is called keepvid.com, and this is a web page where you can download YouTube videos. And so if there's a YouTube video that you want to incorporate into your podcast or into your PowerPoint, I know sometimes it gets challenging because you're not sure how your internet connection is going to be. And so this way you can download the actual video, save it to a thumb drive or to the, your hard drive to be able to use without having access to the internet. And then as far as images, I find Google Images to be by far the best place to find images. My only recommendation on Google Images would be make sure that you are using a good search term, and that you are making sure that when you are copying and pasting those pictures in, you are using the highest resolution picture that you can get from that particular page, and that you never make the pictures larger. Always make them smaller. If you take a small picture and make it big, it can look distorted and stretched, and that just doesn't make your presentation look very good. And so you'll want to make sure that you make the presentation, make the images smaller, but never make them larger. Okay, so again, just some tips as far as effective PowerPoints. We talked about make sure that your fonts are very simple fonts. Make sure that when you're using color, you're limiting the use of color. Prefer to use black on white. With graphic and design, make sure that you're trying to keep everything uniform and clean. And general presentation, just make sure that you're not reading the scripts, reading the slides to your audience, that you're keeping your audience in front of you and talking to them, and that's what really sells a presentation. And then going beyond the screen, try to think of your presentation living on beyond just today. And recording your podcast is a great way to help others learn not just today, but tomorrow. Thank you so much.